Is that seriously what you wore? Vanessa Moore laughed, eyes dropping to his scuffed shoes. This is a five-star place, not a bus stop. Marco Bellini, the head host, let out a polite chuckle. Ma'am, we can seat you somewhere more suitable while we handle... His gaze flicked to the worn jacket. This. Nearby diners stared, just long enough to make it sting. The single dad didn't argue. He adjusted the strap of the small backpack at his side and stood there calmly, as if their judgment was just weather. They didn't know their laughter was about to echo back. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. This wasn't a story about clothes. It was about how fast strangers decide your worth. Before you see the exact moment the host's voice cracked when he announced the table was paid for, you need to see how they pushed a quiet man into the spotlight. Ethan Cole took one slow breath beneath the chandelier's white shine. He'd been in rooms like this before, back when his name opened doors. Tonight, he wore what his life allowed, clean, practical, unremarkable. Marco lifted the reservation tablet without checking it. We're fully booked, reservations only. Ethan's eyes drifted past the velvet rope. Empty tables waited, set like trophies. The lie wasn't about availability. It was about permission. I didn't think you'd show up like that, Vanessa said, voice tight. People are watching. I know, he replied evenly. Marco leaned closer to her, loud enough to entertain. I can move you to the lounge, less attention. Ethan felt the old instinct to correct, to command, to end this with a sentence. He swallowed it down. The only opinion that mattered tonight was asleep across town. His phone had buzzed earlier, a photo from the neighbor. Lila on the couch, rabbit under her chin, trusting the world because her dad kept it steady. Ethan had promised he'd be back before her second yawn. That promise was why he didn't turn around and leave. A faint mechanical whine threaded through the lobby under the piano. It wavered, dipped, then returned sharper. Ethan's head tilted a fraction. He heard problems the way some people heard gossip. Footsteps clicked across marble. Camilla Hale appeared beside the host stand with a presence that made staff straighten. Tailored blazer, hair pinned back, eyes like a locked door. What is taking so long? She asked. Marco snapped upright. Ms. Hale, a guest issue. This gentleman doesn't appear to have a reservation. Camilla's eyes skimmed Ethan once, fast, dismissive, final. Then he isn't a guest, she said. We can't have walk-ins diluting the brand. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan met Camilla's gaze without heat, without pleading. Calm wasn't surrender. Calm was control. I do have a reservation, he said. Camilla's lips curved. Of course. Pulled out a folded printout, creased from being checked twice in the car. Marco took it, eyes scanning. His smirk faltered. It's here, Marco muttered. Table for two. Camilla's expression tightened, offended by paper. Fine, seat them and don't make a scene. He followed Marco past the velvet rope, past glances that slid over him like cold rain. Vanessa walked half a step ahead, as if distance could protect her. Crossing the dining room, Ethan noticed what others ignored. The light near the bar, dimmer than it should be, the air warmer by the service corridor, a faint chemical tang that didn't belong with garlic and wine. The wine returned, deeper now, uneven. Something was wrong beneath all this polish. At the table, Ethan set the backpack by his feet like it mattered, then sat without shrinking. Vanessa smoothed her dress, forcing a smile that couldn't decide if it was apology or performance. So, she said, pretending the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. What do you do? Ethan's gaze drifted toward the service corridor. The whine stuttered, and somewhere behind the wall, metal groaned. Right now, he said quietly, I make sure things don't fall apart. A server arrived with water. The piano kept playing. Then the hotel's hidden machinery made a harsh, stuttering sound, loud enough that heads turned, conversations died, and Camilla Hale's eyes snapped toward the corridor like she just remembered money can't argue with physics. Camilla's hand lifted, sharp. Marco, get engineering. Now, clear the corridor. Unease rippled as waiters paused mid-step, trays trembling. Beyond the wall, a second groan answered the first, lower, heavier, like pressure trapped in pipes. Ethan didn't look surprised. He leaned forward, listening, counting beats between the noises, mapping the building in his mind. Vanessa whispered, What is that? He didn't answer. He just stood. His chair scraped softly, the first sound of action from him. The scrape of the chair drew more attention than Ethan expected. Heads turned, eyes tracking him like he'd just violated another unspoken rule. People didn't stand up in places like this unless they were being celebrated or escorted out. Camilla Hale snapped toward him. Sir, please sit down. We have staff trained for this. The word trained hung there, polished and empty. Ethan paused, fingers resting on the chair back. The vibration under the floor was clearer now, a low-frequency tremor that traveled through bone more than air. He felt it in his knees, in the table leg, in the glass of water quivering faintly. Engineering's on the way, Marco said quickly, glancing between Camilla and Ethan, as if afraid the wrong choice might cost him his job. Everything's under control. Ethan slowly sat back down, not because he was convinced, but because panic always bloomed faster when someone looked like they were taking charge, without permission. Across from him, Vanessa leaned closer, voice tight. You're not seriously about to interfere, right? This is their problem. He met her eyes, searching for something steady there. He didn't find it. The vibration intensified, followed by a sharp metallic clack from behind the service wall. Several guests gasped. Someone laughed nervously. The piano faltered, then stopped entirely. Camilla lifted her phone. I want an update in 30 seconds, she said, already walking away. Authority, she believed, was motion. Ethan exhaled through his nose. 30 seconds was optimistic, dangerous even. He glanced toward the corridor again. The heat there was wrong, too localized, too fast. Old instincts stirred, the ones he thought he'd buried with suits and conference badges years ago. Vanessa watched him with a mix of irritation and confusion. You're staring like you know what's happening. I have a guess, he said. She scoffed softly. Based on what? Vibes? Patterns, he replied. A waiter rushed past their table, whispering into a headset. A second later, a warning chime sounded overhead, soft, polite, designed not to alarm. It failed. Ethan stood again. This time, no one stopped him. Sir, Marco started, but Ethan was already moving toward the corridor, drawn by the sound of a system straining beyond its margin. Vanessa hissed, Ethan, don't! He turned back just long enough to say, If I'm wrong, I'll sit back down. The corridor was narrower, the luxury peeling away into brushed steel and humming panels. Heat pressed against his face as soon as he crossed the threshold. A young technician knelt by an open access panel, hands shaking, sweat streaking down his temple. It won't cycle, the tech muttered. The override's locked. What system? Ethan asked. The tech looked up, startled. Sir, you can't be back here. What system? He repeated, Firmer now. Load balancing unit, the tech said, words tumbling out. Kitchen, HVAC, part of the lighting grid. It's pulling too much current and the failsafe's cascading, Ethan finished. The tech blinked. How did you... Ethan crouched, eyes scanning the panel, already tracing the logic in his head. Because it always does when the sensors misaligned upstream. Behind them, Camilla's heels clicked to a stop. Who let him in here? Marco followed, pale. Ms. Hale, he walked in. Ethan didn't look up. If you don't vent this line in the next minute, you'll trip the whole wing. Then you'll be evacuating 300 guests in formal wear. Camilla crossed her arms. And you know this because the pitch of that vibration is dropping, he said calmly, which means pressure's building faster than your system can bleed it. Silence fell. Even the tech stopped moving. Camilla scoffed. This is absurd. Step away from the equipment. Ethan finally looked at her. His gaze wasn't defiant. It was tired. You called engineering. I was engineering. The words landed without force, but they landed. The tech's eyes widened. You're serious? I can buy you time, Ethan said, but I need access. Camilla hesitated, authority warring with fear. Another clack echoed through the corridor, louder this time. The lights flickered. Somewhere out in the dining room, a glass shattered. Do it, Camilla snapped, stepping back. But if you make this worse, I won't, he said simply. As he reached into his backpack for a small, well-worn multi-tool, a quiet thought surfaced, unbidden. Lila hates loud alarms. If you're still watching, this is the moment to subscribe. Because what happens next proves why quiet people are the most dangerous to underestimate. Ethan adjusted the panel, fingers steady despite the heat. He listened, not just to the machine, but to the building itself, its rhythm, its strain, its limits. The vibration shifted, the whine softened, the tech let out a shaky breath. It's stabilizing. From the corridor entrance, guests had begun to gather, drawn by instinct and spectacle. Whispers rippled, eyes fixed on the man in the worn jacket, kneeling beside exposed machinery, like he belonged there. Camilla said nothing. She just watched, her certainty cracking with every second the system obeyed him. Ethan tightened the last fastener and stood. The light steadied. The warning chime cut off mid-note. Relief washed through the corridor, sharp and electric. He turned back toward the dining room, aware now of every stare, every recalibration happening behind polished eyes. This wasn't over. It was just becoming public. The moment the warning chime cut out, sound rushed back into the restaurant like breath into lungs. Chairs scraped. Glasses clinked again, tentative at first, then louder as people reassured themselves with noise. The piano resumed, a half beat off, as if the musician's hands were still shaking. Ethan stepped out of the service corridor into that noise and felt it hit him all at once. Dozens of eyes locked onto him. Some were curious. Some were annoyed at the interruption. A few, just a few, held something closer to respect, though none of them would have named it that yet. Camilla Hale moved first. She straightened her blazer, reclaiming posture the way executives reclaim rooms. Everything is stable, she announced, voice smooth enough to iron over fear. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The guests obeyed, because that's what guests do when authority tells them normal has returned. Conversations restarted, but they kept breaking apart, glancing back toward the man in the worn jacket. Ethan felt the adrenaline drain, leaving behind a familiar heaviness. He rolled his shoulders once, grounding himself, then headed back toward his table. Vanessa was already standing. "What was that?" she demanded under her breath. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" He stopped short, surprised, not by her tone, but by how little it stung. "I fixed a problem," he said. "You ran into a restricted area and played hero," she snapped. "You don't do that here. People talk." He looked past her, at the chandeliers, the spotless floors, the illusion of control. People already were. She pressed her lips together, clearly recalibrating. "Camilla Hale doesn't forget faces. You just put a target on yourself." "That wasn't my goal." "Well, it should have been staying invisible," Vanessa said. "That's how places like this work." Ethan pulled out his chair and sat anyway. The backpack rested against his calf, solid and familiar. For a moment, he thought of Lila again, how she'd once asked him why some kids got more turns at the playground. "Because they think they own the slide," he'd told her. "They don't, but they think it." A server approached, cautious now. "Would you like to order?" "Yes," Ethan said. His voice carried just enough confidence to surprise even him. Vanessa hesitated, then sat too, glancing around to see who might be watching. "I still don't understand how you knew what to do back there." He picked up the menu without looking at it. "You don't have to." She frowned. "I'm asking." Before he could answer, Marco appeared at the edge of the table. The head host's usual polish had cracked, replaced by something brittle. "Sir," Marco said, eyes flicking to Vanessa, then back. "Ms. Hale would like a word." Ethan nodded once and stood. As they walked, he noticed the subtle shift in space around them. Staff moved aside faster. Guests quieted when they passed. He hadn't changed. The room had. Camilla waited near the bar, hands clasped tightly enough to whiten her knuckles. When Ethan stopped in front of her, she studied him more carefully than before. His posture, his stillness, the way he didn't fidget under scrutiny. "You caused a disruption," she said. "I prevented a bigger one." Her jaw tightened. "You overstepped." "Yes," he agreed. "But it worked." That stalled her. "You said you were engineering," Camilla continued. "Past tense." Ethan met her gaze. "I used to be." "Used to be what exactly?" she asked, already certain she wouldn't like the answer. Before he could respond, a voice chimed in behind them. "He's the one who fixed the load balancer, right?" A middle-aged man in an expensive suit stepped closer, curiosity outweighing caution. "I heard him call the cascade before it happened." Another guest leaned in. "Same. That was impressive." Camilla's eyes flicked around as attention gathered like heat. This wasn't a boardroom she could clear with a look. This was a dining room full of witnesses. She forced a thin smile. "We appreciate initiative, but what?" the man in the suit asked. "You're saying he's not qualified?" Camilla's smile froze. Ethan felt the pivot, the moment when the story stopped belonging to one person. He hadn't intended this. He'd wanted dinner. He'd wanted to go home before Lila woke up. Instead, the room leaned in. "He just guessed," Camilla said quickly. "Anyone could have been lucky." Ethan shook his head once. "Luck doesn't sound like that." The man in the suit laughed. "He's right. I work in infrastructure. That wasn't luck." Murmurs spread. Phones appeared, discreet but unmistakable. Camilla's authority was slipping, not because she was wrong, but because she was alone. She turned back to Ethan, voice lowered. "What do you want?" The question startled her as much as it did him. Wanting implied leverage. Ethan thought of his daughter, of a quiet home, of promises. "I want to finish my dinner," he said, "and leave." Camilla stared at him, searching for a catch. She didn't find one. "Fine," she said tightly. "Marco will see to it." As Ethan walked back toward the table, the murmurs followed him like a tide that hadn't decided whether to lift or drown. Vanessa watched him approach with a new expression, uncertain, wary, intrigued. He sat, folded his napkin once, and placed it on his lap. The meal arrived moments later, pristine and steaming, as if nothing had happened. But everything had, because now the room was watching not to judge him, but to see what he would do next. Dinner arrived with a hush that felt rehearsed. Plates settled, silverware aligned, steam rising like nothing in the room had nearly broken. Ethan noticed the smell first, butter and herbs, then the absence of vibration beneath the table. The building was quiet again, obedient. Vanessa poked at her food. "People are staring," she murmured. "They'll stop," he said. "They don't stop," she replied, glancing toward the bar. "Not when someone breaks the script." He took a bite, tasting warmth he hadn't expected. Around them, conversation resumed in pockets, then stalled, then resumed again. The piano found its tempo. Glass caught light. Normal tried to reassert itself. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Camilla speaking with Marco, gestures tight and controlled. Every so often, her gaze snapped toward their table, measuring. He felt it like pressure on skin. Vanessa leaned in. "So what were you exactly? Before?" He chewed, swallowed. "I fixed systems." "That's not an answer. It's the one that matters." She studied him, then the backpack by his feet. "You don't look like someone who used to be important." He smiled faintly. "That's the point." A server returned with wine, hesitating an extra beat before setting the glass down. "Compliments of the house," she said, eyes flicking to Camilla for permission that wasn't there. "Thank you," Ethan said. Vanessa watched the glass as if it were evidence. "They're trying to smooth it over." "They can try," he said. The room shifted again when a small group approached, 2 men and a woman, all polished confidence and curiosity. The man in the suit from earlier led, smile easy. "Mind if we say hello?" he asked. Vanessa stiffened. Ethan nodded. "Go ahead." "I'm Daniel Price," the man said. "Facilities oversight for a regional hospital network. I've seen that failure mode before. You called it cold." "Then you know it wasn't luck," Ethan replied. Daniel laughed. "Exactly. My friends were debating whether to buy you a drink." The woman beside him tilted her head. "You don't work here." "No," Ethan said. "Do you consult?" she asked. "Not anymore." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. Attention like this was currency she understood. Camilla appeared at Daniel's shoulder, smile fixed. "I'm glad everything's settled," she said. "We'd prefer guests enjoy their evening without distractions." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "He's not a distraction. He was the solution." A murmur of agreement rippled. Phones angled, subtle but present. Camilla inhaled slowly. "Regardless, we handle our own operations." Ethan set his fork down. "Then you should recalibrate your sensor array. It's drifting under load." The woman blinked. "He's right," she said after a beat. "You'll see it again during peak." Camilla's smile thinned to a line. "Thank you for the feedback." The group drifted away, interest satisfied. Vanessa exhaled. "You just corrected her. In public," he shrugged. "She asked for normal." "That wasn't normal," Vanessa said. "That was confident." Ethan glanced at the exit, calculating time. Lila would be stirring soon. He reached into the backpack and pulled out a folded drawing, smoothing it on the table. A stick-figure family under a crooked sun, labeled in careful letters. Vanessa's expression softened. "Your daughter?" He nodded. "She thinks I fix broken things." Vanessa smiled despite herself. "She's not wrong." Camilla returned alone. No host, no buffer. Just her and the truth she didn't like. "I'm told you intend to leave soon," she said. "Yes. Before you do," Camilla continued, voice lower, "I need to understand why." Ethan met her eyes. "Because my kid needs me." Camilla hesitated. The answer wasn't leverage. It was inconveniently human. She gestured toward the table. "Your dinner will be taken care of." He shook his head. "I've got it." Her brows knit. "It's the least we can do." "The least," he said gently, "would be to treat people like they belong." A silence stretched between them, fragile. Then Camilla nodded once. "Marco," she called. The host appeared, pale but attentive. "Prepare the check," Camilla said, "and bring it to me." Ethan watched her walk. Away, heels clicking with less certainty than before. Vanessa looked between them. "What are you doing?" "Closing the loop," he said. The check arrived in a leather folder. Marco placed it down, hands careful. Ethan reached into his jacket, producing a worn card, edges softened by time. He slid it inside the folder without ceremony. Marco glanced, froze, then looked up. "Sir, are you sure?" Ethan nodded. Marco swallowed and lifted the folder, eyes darting to Camilla across the room. She saw his face change and stiffened. Something was about to tip. Across the room, the air held its breath as whispers leaned forward. Ethan felt the weight lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, it would happen in the open, where masks slipped and accounts were settled publicly. Marco crossed the dining room with the leather folder held like a fragile truth. Camilla watched him approach, her expression tightening with each step until he leaned in and whispered. Color drained from her face. She straightened too quickly. "That won't be necessary," she said, voice carrying farther than intended. Marco hesitated. "Ms. Hale, the payment already went through." A hush rolled outward from their table, curiosity feeding on disruption. Ethan remained seated, hands folded, heart steady. This part was never about volume. Camilla stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," Marco said. "The account is valid." Vanessa's breath caught. She looked at Ethan, then at Camilla, then back again. "What account?" Ethan finally stood, not rushed, not theatrical. "Mine." Camilla's eyes flicked to the card still visible in the folder. Recognition stirred, unwelcome. She'd seen that issuer before, only in board packets and private lounges. "That's not possible," she said. Ethan met her gaze. "It is." Around them, phones lifted openly now. Daniel Price hovered nearby, interest sharpened into something like anticipation. Camilla cleared her throat. "Even if you can pay," she said, grasping for ground, "that doesn't change what happened earlier." "It doesn't," Ethan agreed. "It just puts it in context." Marco shifted. "Ms. Hale, would you like me to announce—" "No," Camilla snapped, then stopped herself. Too late. Eyes were everywhere. A guest called out. "Announce what?" Camilla inhaled, calculating, then nodded stiffly. "Go ahead." Marco straightened, voice trembling just enough to sound human. "Ladies and gentlemen, the table near the center has been paid for already, by the gentleman himself." The room froze. Ethan felt the moment land like a clean click, systems aligning. Vanessa stared at him, the last of her assumptions burning away. Camilla stood rigid, applause threatening to erupt around her. She lifted a hand. "Please!" But the sound came anyway, scattered, then growing. Not thunderous, but undeniable. Respect had a different texture than admiration. Ethan raised his palm slightly, calming it. "Thank you," he said. "Really, but I'm heading out." Camilla swallowed. "May I ask what you do?" He considered the question. "I fix complex systems," he said. "I used to do it at a very high level. Now I do it where it matters." Her voice softened despite herself. "And earlier, the load balancer. I designed similar architectures," he said. "Years ago." A beat passed. "For whom?" she asked. "For people who never worried about dinner," he replied. Vanessa found her voice. "You could have said something." "I could have," Ethan said. "But then I'd be someone else. If you're still with me, this is a good moment to subscribe, because what comes next isn't about winning, it's about consequences." Camilla nodded slowly, humility edging in. "You were treated unfairly." "Yes," he said, "and you can fix that." She gestured to the staff. "Ensure every guest tonight is treated with respect," she said. "No exceptions." It wasn't a grand apology. It was a start. Ethan picked up the backpack and the drawing, tucking them close. Vanessa stood uncertainly. "I didn't see you." He smiled kindly. "Most people don't, at first." The attention didn't feel hostile now. It felt curious, searching for rules that no longer worked. Servers slowed, unsure which script to follow, while managers hovered at a respectful distance, waiting for direction that wasn't coming. Ethan sensed the shift the way sailors sense a tide. Not dramatic, just irreversible. He hadn't raised his voice or claimed a throne. He'd simply refused to play small. For Camilla, the realization cut deeper than embarrassment. It threatened a belief she relied on, that control was permanent if polished enough. Watching guests nod at Ethan, she felt the room detach from her certainty. Power, she saw, could migrate. Vanessa watched it all with conflicted eyes, recognizing the cost of assumptions she wore as armor. She understood, finally, that status without substance was noise. The realization didn't redeem her, but it cracked something open. Ethan breathed out, letting the moment finish. He didn't need apologies or invitations. He needed time, and the knowledge that dignity could be quiet and still land. The building hummed obediently, systems aligned, proof that balance returns when truth is applied. Tonight had been loud, but the lesson would linger, subtle, durable, and shared by everyone who witnessed it. As he walked toward the exit, the space parted without effort. The piano stopped. Someone opened the door. Outside, the night air cooled his face. The city hummed, indifferent and honest. Behind him, Camilla remained, staring at the doorway where power had just passed through without asking permission. Ethan checked his phone. A message waited. Lila awake, asking if he'd be home soon. He typed back a single word, yes, and stepped into the dark, dignity intact, lesson delivered, the balance finally reset. The night air wrapped around him like a reset, cool and honest. Ethan took 3 steps from the doorway before he felt it, the pause behind him, the weight of someone deciding whether to follow. He didn't turn. He already knew who it would be. "Wait," Camilla's voice carried out onto the pavement, stripped of amplification and certainty. He stopped, hands still on the backpack strap, listening to the city hum around them. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere above, an air conditioning unit rattled, struggling, then settling. "I'm listening," he said. She came closer, heels clicking softer now. "You didn't have to humiliate us in there." "I didn't," he replied. "I paid my bill. That announcement wasn't my idea." She exhaled sharply, frustration leaking through control. "You know what I mean. You let them see." Ethan turned then, meeting her eyes under the hotel's glass awning. "They were already looking. I just didn't hide." For a moment, Camilla looked like someone standing at the edge of a cracked map. "You could have leveraged that," she said. "Consulting, partnerships, people would line up." "I know," he said. "They used to." Silence stretched. Traffic flowed. The building behind them glowed, polished and distant, as if pretending nothing had changed. Camilla folded her arms, then let them fall. "You said you designed systems like ours." "Yes." "How high did you go?" she asked, unable to keep it out. He considered. "High enough to forget why." Her brow creased. "Why leave?" Ethan pictured Lila's drawing, the crooked sun. "Because the system I was in stopped caring who paid the cost." Camilla looked back through the glass at the dining room, where staff reset tables and guests resumed their evenings, altered but unaware of how. "You exposed a blind spot," she said quietly. "Mine." "That's how systems fail," he replied. "Not from overload, from ignoring small signals." She nodded, absorbing it despite herself. "What do you do now?" "I choose where I'm useful." A beat passed. The city's noise filled it. "Thank you," Camilla said at last. He studied her, weighing sincerity. "You're welcome." As he turned to leave, a voice called from the doorway. "Sir?" Daniel Price stepped out, coat over his arm. "I just wanted to say, what you did back there, people noticed." Ethan smiled faintly. "People always do, eventually." Daniel laughed. "If you ever change your mind about consulting, I won't," Ethan said, kindly. Daniel nodded, respect settling in. "Fair enough. Have a good night." Ethan walked toward the curb, the backpack a steady pull against his shoulder. With each step, the night loosened its grip on the building behind him. He didn't look back again. Inside, Camilla returned to the dining room alone. Conversations dipped as she passed, eyes tracking, reassessing. She felt it now, the shift of authority, subtle but real. It wasn't gone. It was accountable. Marco approached, cautious. "Ms. Hale?" She met his gaze. "What did we miss?" Marco swallowed. "A lot, I think." She nodded once. "Make a note. Update our protocols. Training, too." "Yes, ma'am." "And Marco," she added, "next time someone walks in wearing work boots, seat them like they own the place." He blinked, then nodded. "Understood." The piano restarted, steadier this time. Staff moved with renewed purpose, as if the room had been recalibrated. Outside, Ethan climbed onto the bus just as the doors hissed shut. He took a seat by the window, resting his forehead briefly against the glass. The city slid by in streaks of light, ordinary and forgiving. His phone buzzed. A photo loaded slowly. Lila in pajamas, hair wild, holding the rabbit up to the camera. Under it, a message. "Can you tuck me in?" "I'm close," he typed back. Across the aisle, a man in a suit glanced at him, then away, assumptions half formed and discarded. Ethan felt no need to correct them. He had nothing to prove now. The bus rumbled onward, carrying workers, students, quiet victories. Ethan watched reflections blur, thinking about how easily dignity traveled when it wasn't weighed down by performance. Behind him, in a dining room full of witnesses, the story was already being retold. Some would focus on the clothes, others on the payment. A few would remember the calm. That was enough. He knew tomorrow would look the same on the surface. Early bus, modest work, small routines. But something beneath had shifted, like a bearing realigned. Quiet changes lasted longer. They didn't need applause, only consistency, patience, and follow-through every day. The bus slowed. Ethan stood, stepping into the cool night again. As he walked toward home, the city seemed less hostile, its systems humming in balance. He adjusted the backpack, feeling the familiar weight, and smiled to himself. Not because he'd won, but because he'd stayed exactly who he was when it mattered. The bus dropped him 2 blocks from home, the doors sighing open before closing again, like the end of a held breath. Ethan stepped onto the sidewalk and let the quiet settle. Streetlights hummed overhead, casting pale halos onto cracked pavement. Somewhere a dog barked once, then stopped. His phone buzzed again. Lila's name lit the screen. He didn't answer it right away. He wanted to walk the last stretch without a screen between him and the night, to let the tension drain fully. The hotel, the eyes, the announcement. They already felt farther away than they should have. That was how moments like that worked. Loud when they arrived, soft when they stayed. At the apartment door, he paused, listening. No crying, no panic. Just the low murmur of a cartoon leaking through the wall from a neighbor's place. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Dad!" Lila barreled toward him in socked feet, rabbit clutched under one arm. He knelt just in time to catch her, the impact light but decisive, like the answer to a question he'd been carrying all night. "Hey," he said, pressing his cheek to her hair. "Still awake, huh?" "You were late," she accused, muffled against his shoulder. "I know. I'm sorry." She leaned back to look at him, eyes serious. "Did the fancy place yell at you?" He smiled despite himself. "Something like that." They moved through the small apartment together, muscle memory guiding him. Backpack on the hook. Shoes by the door. The drawing returned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. Routine reclaimed him, piece by piece. As he tucked her in, Lila studied his face. "Did you fix something?" He hesitated. "Yes." She nodded, satisfied. "Good, fixing's important." After the light clicked off, Ethan stood in the hallway longer than necessary, breathing in the quiet. That was the victory that mattered. Not applause, not recognition. This. Across town, the hotel glowed against the skyline, still processing what had happened within its walls. Camilla sat alone in her office, jacket folded on the chair, lights dimmed. The night's reports lay open on her desk, unread. Her mind kept replaying the moment she'd lost control, not explosively, but cleanly, in front of witnesses. She opened her laptop and searched the card issuer again, confirming what she already knew. The name matched archived profiles, articles buried behind paywalls, keynote footage from a decade ago. The man in the worn jacket hadn't exaggerated. If anything, he'd understated. Camilla closed the laptop. Control, she realized, wasn't about keeping people small. It was about knowing when you weren't the smartest person in the room and listening before systems broke. She sent a message to her executive team. Mandatory review, morning briefing, no excuses. The tone was different, less defensive, more precise. Back in the apartment, Ethan sat at the small kitchen table with a glass of water, the city noise drifting in through the window. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, then let it go to voicemail. He knew what it would be, an offer, a bridge back to a world he'd already crossed away from. The message icon lit up. He didn't listen. Instead, he opened the fridge and pulled out leftovers, eating slowly, letting the ordinary reclaim its place. Outside, rain began to fall, light and steady, tapping against glass like fingers reminding him to stay present. Across social feeds, the story took shape without his consent. A post here, a video clip there, speculation layered over fact. Some painted him as a secret millionaire, others as a hero. A few guessed closer to the truth. He ignored it all. At the hotel, Marco finished his shift differently than usual. He walked the floor with new eyes, noticing the way guests arrived, the way staff flinched before deciding how to treat them. He made quiet adjustments, a table here, a greeting there, small shifts, but deliberate. By morning, the ripple would widen. Ethan washed his plate, set it in the rack, and checked on Lila one last time. She slept sprawled across the bed, rabbit discarded, dreams loud enough to soften her breathing. He leaned against the door frame, feeling the weight of the day settle into something manageable. Tomorrow would bring questions, maybe consequences, maybe nothing at all. That was fine. He didn't need the world to change overnight. He needed it to remember, just a little, that power didn't always look the way people expected, and that dignity, once seen, was hard to unsee. Outside, the rain thickened, washing the street clean in narrow lines of silver. Somewhere in the city, systems recalibrated, some mechanical, some human, responding not to force, but to clarity applied at the right moment. Ethan turned off the hall light and headed to bed, the quiet following him like a promise kept. Morning came softly, filtered through thin curtains and the smell of reheated coffee. Ethan woke before the alarm, listening to rain finish its work on the city. The phone lay face down on the table, stubbornly quiet after a night of ignored notifications. He moved through the apartment with practiced economy, packing lunches, tying shoes, smoothing hair. Lila hummed to herself, unaware of the echo her father had left across town. To her, today was school and spelling tests, and whether the rabbit needed a sweater. At the corner, the bus arrived late. Commuters piled in, damp coats brushing. A man in a tailored jacket nodded to Ethan, then hesitated, recognition tugging without landing. Ethan returned the nod and looked out the window, watching the hotel district slide past like a different country. Across the river, Camilla Hale stood at the glass wall of her office, city reflected across her face. Overnight reports scrolled on her tablet, guest feedback, staff notes, clipped videos already circulating. She didn't watch the clips. She read the margins, the comments from employees who'd never written before. She convened the morning briefing without ceremony. No speeches, no branding language, just questions. Where did protocol fail? Who felt unheard? Which signals were ignored? The room shifted, uncertain but alert, as if discovering a new operating system. Back on the bus, Ethan felt the vibration change as it crossed a bridge seam. He smiled at the familiarity of it. System spoke if you listened. His phone buzzed again. He glanced. Another unknown number. He slipped it back into his pocket. At school drop-off, Lila squeezed his hand. "Fix good today," she said, solemn as a judge. He nodded. "I'll try." He walked the extra block before turning back toward work, letting the city reset his pace. Messages would keep coming, invitations, maybe apologies. None of them would tuck a child in tonight. At the hotel, Camilla toured the floor, not to be seen, but to see. She watched a host hesitate, then correct himself. She noted a server kneel to a child's level. Small things, leading indicators. Marco approached, careful. "We're getting calls," he said. "People asking about him." Camilla stopped. "Then answer this," she said. "We treat every guest as if they matter, because they do." If this story has you thinking differently about who holds real power, take a second to subscribe. Stories like this don't chase noise, they reveal it. By afternoon, the city had decided what to call the night. Headlines softened it into a lesson. Posts sharpened it into a flex. Ethan ignored both, focusing on a stubborn valve at a small building where nobody cared who fixed it, only that it worked. When the valve turned and the hiss eased, a tenant smiled in gratitude. That smile carried more weight than any announcement. Camilla ended her day with a single email to staff, brief and plain. "Thank you for speaking up. Keep listening. Systems improve when people do." Evening settled. Ethan picked up Lila, cooked dinner, read 2 chapters, then one more because the rain returned. As he turned off the light, his phone chimed once more. This time, a voicemail icon. He listened. It was an apology, halting and sincere, offered without conditions. He saved it, not as leverage, but as proof that ripples reached shore. He lay awake a minute longer, considering the day. Nothing dramatic had happened. That was the point. The victory wasn't the room freezing. It was the thaw afterward, the recalibration that stuck. Outside, the city hummed, quieter than before. Somewhere, a host greeted a guest without weighing shoes. Somewhere else, a parent fixed a small thing and went home on time. Ethan closed his eyes, content with the work ahead, knowing the balance he'd nudged would keep correcting itself, one ordinary choice at a time. He dreamed lightly, not of ballrooms or lights, but of diagrams sketched in pencil and erased cleanly. In the dream, doors opened because hinges were aligned, not because anyone knocked. Morning would come again, ordinary and fair enough. He would board the same bus, fix another quiet problem, answer one careful question at a time. Somewhere, policies would change, hosts would pause, managers would listen. Not everywhere, not always, but enough. That was the kind of progress worth making, the kind that didn't announce itself, the kind that lasted after applause faded and phones dimmed. When he woke, the rain would be gone, the city rinsed, and the work would continue, steady and unglamorous, exactly where power never looked. Tomorrow mattered less than the pattern he protected, small corrections accumulating into trust. It wasn't heroic, but it was human, and that was enough for him. Every day, quietly, by choice, again and again, without asking permission from anyone else. The next morning unfolded without headlines, which felt intentional. Ethan preferred it that way. He woke before dawn, brewed coffee strong enough to cut through the leftover rain, and reviewed his work list for the day. No emergencies, no drama, just maintenance calls that kept small systems alive. At the bus stop, a woman nodded to him, familiar now. Routine had a way of building quiet recognition. He took a seat by the window again, watching the city wake itself up. Storefront lights flickered on. Delivery trucks idled. The rhythm felt right. Across town, Camilla arrived early. She walked the hotel floor before guests appeared, shoes clicking softly, eyes catching details she'd once dismissed. A scuffed baseboard, a flickering sconce. Signs of strain she now knew could become something larger if ignored. She stopped at the host stand where Marco stood reviewing reservations. He looked up, nervous. "Good morning." "Morning," she said. "Anything unusual?" He shook his head. "No, but staff's talking." About what? About how we treat people. Camilla nodded. Good. At mid-morning, Ethan received a message from the building manager at the hotel. Not an offer, not a pitch, a request, a small one. Could he look over a recurring fault report? Just an opinion. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Helping wasn't the same as returning. He typed back a single sentence. Careful. Send the data. No commitments. The report arrived minutes later. Ethan read it on his lunch break, tracing patterns the way he always did. The fault wasn't isolated. It was structural. He typed a response, clear and concise, recommending changes that prioritized prevention over optics. No signature, just facts. Back at the hotel, Camilla read the response twice. It wasn't flattering. It didn't mention her leadership. It focused on risk and responsibility. She forwarded it to engineering without edits. That's the fix, she said. Do it. Engineering hesitated. It's not cheap. It's necessary, she replied. By afternoon, word had spread through staff channels. Not the story of the dinner. The story of the changes. New protocols. New authority lines. Fewer shortcuts. The hotel began to feel different in subtle ways, like a room after furniture had been rearranged to let light through. Ethan finished his last job early. He walked home instead of taking the bus, enjoying the air after rain. At a corner, he spotted a familiar suit waiting at a crosswalk. Daniel Price glanced over, recognition landing this time. Hey, Daniel said. You got a minute? Ethan stopped. One. Daniel smiled. I won't waste it. I just wanted you to know they're implementing your recommendations properly. Ethan nodded. Good. You could have stayed anonymous, Daniel added. Why reply at all? Ethan considered. Because ignoring a failing system doesn't make it go away, Daniel laughed softly. You really don't miss it, do you? No, Ethan said. I miss meaning. Daniel held out a hand. Ethan shook it, brief and firm. Then Daniel crossed the street, swallowed back into the city. That evening, Ethan cooked dinner while Lila colored at the table. She held up a page. I drew you at work, he leaned over. Looks important. You're fixing the big lines, she said, pointing to looping shapes. Those are the hardest, he agreed. Later, as she slept, Ethan checked his phone. One new voicemail. Camilla's voice, measured and careful. Not an apology this time. A thank you, specific, grounded. She mentioned staff morale, fewer incidents, a shift. He deleted the message after listening. Gratitude wasn't currency. It was confirmation. Across the city, Camilla stood alone in the dining room after closing. She imagined the space as it had been that night, frozen in judgment. Then she imagined it as it was becoming, open, attentive, less brittle. The change felt fragile, but real. She picked up a chair that had been left out of place and set it right herself. No audience, no announcement. Ethan lay in bed later, rain finally gone, window cracked open. The city breathed in and out, balanced for now. He thought about leverage and choice, about how easy it would have been to trade dignity for convenience. He hadn't. Tomorrow would bring another call, another small correction. Maybe from the hotel, maybe from somewhere else. He would decide each time on his terms. That was the preparation no one saw. Not the payment, not the applause, the discipline of staying aligned, of knowing when to engage and when to walk away. The victory wasn't behind him. It was ongoing, renewed daily, invisible unless you looked closely. Ethan turned on his side, listening to the quiet hum of systems working as they should. Somewhere, protocols were rewritten. Somewhere else, a host paused before judging. The world didn't flip. It adjusted, and that adjustment, he knew, was the most powerful thing of all. The hotel lobby felt different the next time Ethan stepped inside. Not louder, not quieter, just calibrated. He noticed it immediately, the way one notices air pressure changes before weather shifts. Staff moved with less urgency and more intention. Conversations flowed without that brittle edge he remembered. He hadn't planned to come back. The request had been specific this time. Engineering wanted him to walk through the updated systems, eyes only, no tools. He'd agreed on one condition: he wouldn't be announced. Camilla met him near the service corridor, not at the host stand. No blazer today, just a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled. She offered a nod, not a handshake. Respect without theater. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm here to look," he replied. "That's it." They walked together, footsteps soft against marble. Guests passed without a second glance. That anonymity felt earned now, not imposed. In the corridor, panels were open, cleanly labeled. The heat was controlled. The vibration was steady, predictable. Ethan listened, head tilted, letting the building speak. It did. "Better," he said. Engineering hovered nearby, attentive but not defensive. One of them asked a question, careful, technical, sincere. Ethan answered without condescension, pointing out a minor alignment issue, praising what had been done right. Camilla watched it unfold, the difference between authority and leadership no longer abstract. The room didn't defer to Ethan because of status. It trusted him because he was useful. They returned to the dining room. Lunch service had begun, quieter than dinner, sunlight pooling across tables. A family was seated near the window, a father in work boots, a child swinging legs beneath the chair. No one stared. No one whispered. "That," Ethan said, nodding subtly, "is working." Camilla followed his gaze. Something in her expression softened. "We're trying." A pause settled. Not awkward, considered. "I won't ask you to stay," she said finally. "But if we hit something we can't solve—" Ethan shook his head gently. "You'll solve it. You're listening now." She smiled, small and real. "Then this is goodbye." "For now," he said. As he turned to leave, a voice rose behind them. "Excuse me." The man in the suit from the other night, Daniel, stood with a woman and two teenagers. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "My daughter works in hospitality. Seeing this place change matters." Ethan nodded. "It always does." They watched him go, blending back into the flow of guests and staff, another person with a purpose that didn't announce itself. Outside, the city was bright and unbothered. Ethan checked the time. He was early. That felt like a win. He took the bus home, seat by the window, familiar faces nodding hello. At a stoplight, he caught his reflection, older than he remembered, calmer than he'd ever been. At home, Lila greeted him with news of a spelling test passed. He celebrated appropriately, loud enough to matter. Dinner was simple. Laughter was easy. Later, after she slept, Ethan stood by the window, watching lights flicker on across the city. Somewhere behind those lights, systems hummed. People worked. Small decisions accumulated. The reversal had happened already. Not when the room froze. Not when the card slid across the table. It happened when those with power chose to change instead of defend. That was the part no one filmed. Ethan turned away from the window and shut off the light. Tomorrow would come with its own problems. He'd meet them where he stood, tools ready, ego nowhere in sight. The city breathed, balanced for now, and he let himself rest inside that balance, knowing it would hold. at least until the next quiet correction was needed. The city settled into a quieter rhythm as the week bent toward its end. Ethan felt it on the bus rides, in the way people met each other's eyes a fraction longer, as if recalibrating what respect looked like. He didn't seek it, but he noticed when it showed up unannounced. At work, the calls were ordinary. A rattling vent, a stubborn panel, a hallway light that flickered because someone years ago had cut a corner. Ethan fixed each one the same way, slowly, thoroughly, without comment. The tenants thanked him. He nodded and moved on. Mid-afternoon, his phone buzzed with a name he didn't expect to see again. Vanessa Moore. He stared at it until it stopped ringing. Minutes later, a message arrived, careful and edited. She apologized for laughing, for assuming, for confusing confidence with worth. She didn't ask for anything. Ethan read it once, then again, then set the phone down. He didn't reply. Not because he was angry, but because closure didn't require conversation. Some lessons finished without witnesses. Across town, Camilla stood in the service corridor during a fire drill she'd ordered herself. Staff moved with calm precision, following protocols that existed now because someone had questioned them. She watched closely, correcting nothing, learning everything. When the alarm ended, she thanked the team and meant it. No speeches, no slogans, just acknowledgement. The building responded the way systems did when treated honestly. It behaved. That evening, Ethan arrived home earlier than usual. Lila was at the table, coloring inside lines she'd once ignored. He sat beside her, watching the careful concentration. "Looks serious," he said. "It is," she replied. "I'm practicing." He smiled. Practice mattered. After dinner, he helped her with homework, then listened to her recount the day with the gravity of a reporter. When she finally slept, he washed dishes and stood by the sink longer than necessary, hands resting on cool porcelain. His phone buzzed again. A voicemail. He listened. Camilla's voice, steady and clear. She acknowledged the harm done that night. She named it. She explained the changes underway and why they mattered. She didn't defend herself. She didn't ask forgiveness. She thanked him for intervening when it would have been easier to leave. Ethan ended the call and set the phone down. He didn't save the message this time. He didn't need to. The proof was already moving through the city, invisible but real. Later, lying in bed, he thought about the moment the room had frozen. How tempting it would have been to enjoy it, to let the attention turn sharp and validating. He was glad he hadn't. Moments like that could calcify into something ugly if you held them too tightly. The next morning, the bus was crowded. A young man in a press suit offered his seat to an older woman without prompting. Ethan noticed. The woman smiled, surprised, and sat. The small exchange warmed the air. At the hotel, Camilla signed off on a new training module and paused before sending it. She reread the opening line, then simplified it. "Respect isn't a brand value, it's a practice." She hit send. Marco finished his shift and held the door for a delivery driver juggling boxes. The driver nodded, grateful. Marco felt the nod linger, heavier than a tip. Ethan spent the afternoon replacing a corroded valve in a basement that smelled like iron and damp. The work was physical, grounding. When the flow stabilized, the pipes quieted, and he felt the familiar satisfaction settle in his chest. On his way out, the building manager stopped him. "You're good," she said. "We don't say it enough," he shrugged. "Say it to the system," he replied. "It listens." At home, Lila waited with a question she'd been holding. "Why did they laugh at you?" He considered his answer carefully. Because they were scared of being wrong. She frowned. That's silly. It is, he agreed. But people do silly things when they forget what matters. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her book. That night, the city felt less sharp. Ethan walked the block after bedtime, letting cool air reset him. He passed the glow of storefronts and bus stops, ordinary life humming along. The story of the dinner faded from feeds, replaced by the next distraction. What remained were the adjustments beneath the surface, the quiet rewiring of expectations. Ethan returned home, locked the door, and checked on Lila once more. She slept deeply, unbothered by reputations and reversals. He stood in the doorway, understanding something simple and durable. Justice didn't always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it showed up as alignment, as a system finally doing what it was supposed to do. Satisfied, he turned off the light and let the night hold. Tomorrow would bring work, patience, and quiet care. Morning arrived without ceremony, the kind that didn't announce itself but still counted. Ethan woke to soft light and the sound of a neighbor's radio drifting through the wall. He lay still for a moment, listening, confirming that everything was where it should be. Lila stirred soon after, padding into the kitchen with her rabbit trailing behind. "Is today normal?" she asked. He smiled. "Yeah, today's normal." They ate breakfast at the small table, cereal and toast, the fridge humming steadily behind them. Normal meant homework reminders, forgotten socks, a rushed goodbye at the door. Normal meant systems working quietly in the background. After the bus pulled away from the curb, Ethan stood for a moment longer than usual, watching it disappear down the street. He felt settled. The kind of settled that didn't need applause to exist. Across the city, Camilla Hale walked through the hotel lobby during a morning rush. Guests checked in, staff moved with purpose, and the space felt balanced, no sharp edges, no unnecessary tension. She noticed a man in worn jeans approach the desk, his shoulders tight. The host smiled and welcomed him without hesitation. Camilla kept walking. The change didn't belong to her anymore. That was the point. Ethan spent the day fixing what needed fixing: a faulty breaker, a loose handrail, small interventions that kept other people's lives from tipping into chaos. Nobody asked where he came from. Nobody needed to. In the afternoon, rain threatened again, but never quite fell. The city held its breath and moved on. When Ethan returned home, Lila was already inside, coloring at the table. She looked up. "I told my teacher you fix important things." He raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" "She said all fixing is important," Lila replied. He nodded. "She's right." Dinner was louder than usual. Lila laughed so hard she snorted and didn't care. Ethan laughed with her, letting the sound fill the room. Later, as he tucked her in, she asked the question she'd been circling for days. "Are you glad you went on that date?" He thought about the hotel, the stairs, the frozen room. Then he thought about the quiet ripple afterward, the recalibrated systems, the softened edges, the lessons that stuck. "Yes," he said honestly, "I am." "Even though they laughed?" "Especially because they laughed," he said. "That's how we learned who needed fixing." She considered that, then smiled sleepily. "Okay." After the light went out, Ethan sat alone in the living room, the apartment dim and steady. He checked his phone one last time. No new messages, no noise. That felt right. Somewhere across town, Camilla closed her office door at the end of a long day and looked out at the city. She no longer thought about the man in the worn jacket as a disruption. She thought of him as a correction, one she was grateful she'd been forced to accept in public. Marco finished his shift and headed home, holding the door for two guests arguing softly about where to eat next. He smiled to himself. The work felt different now. The city carried on, unaware of the invisible adjustments made in its bones. That was how progress usually happened, not with headlines, but with habits. Ethan washed a cup, set it in the rack, and leaned against the counter. He felt no need to revisit the moment of reversal again. It had done its job. The dignity he'd reclaimed wasn't fragile. It was anchored. He turned off the lights and headed to bed, knowing tomorrow would ask nothing extraordinary of him. Just attention. Just care. Before sleep took him, one thought surfaced, quiet and certain. Real power didn't need to be seen to work. And now, before we go, tell me the title of the next story you want to hear. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad went on a blind date after his shift, then recognized his boss's voice. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?